bit controversial. It's been in the news. There have been some fatalities with people calling 911 for mental health checks. And that's what I want to address today. I want to share my experience with calling 911 for my son and talk about some victims and, in the end, coming up with some solutions. So I want to just start by just sharing my story and my involvement with calling the police or 911. There was a time, it's been about 3 years now, where Ben was in and out of the hospital. There were times when people have called 911 because he was having an episode. There was also a time when I've called 911. And I'm going to talk about that one in particular situation where I called 911 and they asked police, ambulance, or fire. I said ambulance. They got some details and they assessed the situation, and they thought it would be safest to have the police go ahead first before the paramedics to make sure it was a safe situation. This is what they're trained to do, and I'm all for it. Skip ahead, I met the police at the location where Ben was, where he was living at the time, and I asked if I can go ahead before them because I know that seeing a police officer and the uniform is a trigger, so it could escalate quite quickly. And they agreed, and so I walked in ahead and I saw him and I said, "Hey," and he saw the police behind me and he started to freak out. And so I asked the officers if they could just give me a minute to try to talk him down, because in the past I have talked him down. And in this case, he escalated quite quickly once he saw the police officers. And that's a really important point, the trigger of seeing a police officer. Ben, in his situation, this is not unusual. It does happen in other mental health situations. And to make a long story short, I could not talk him down. Ben started to get a bit violent and they had to restrain him, and it was not pleasant because I'm the one that called for the backup and the help. They did get him into the ambulance and had to sedate him, and thankfully that is history and he survived it. Now, that being said, in the last few months there's been a few fatalities. April 2020, 26-year-old D'Andrecampbell, he passed away, and this was a call that was made from the family. The family had called a number of times for support for a wellness check, and he did not survive. May 2020, 29-year-old Regiskorchinski-Paquet fell to her death. And most recently, June 2020, 62-year-old Ijaz Chaudhry was fatally shot. In this last case, the family tried to tell the police he wasn't a threat to anyone, but as the situation turned out from everything I've read, and I will put links below on things that I speak about today, because I did do my research, and in this last case, the family called for a wellness check, and Ijaz had a mental illness and he was having an episode and he wasn't on his meds, and the family was talking to the police about it, and unfortunately due to circumstances, Ijaz had a knife with him, a kitchen knife, and what we need to understand is that the police are trained in the moment to deal with the situation. I'm going to put a link below. Mark Vallis is a former police officer, and he retired as a use of force training officer. He did that for 20 years. He helped write police curriculum for the use of force in Ontario. And what people need to understand, that police are trained to constantly assess the threat and to act accordingly. Things can change in a blink of an eye. Could these have been prevented? Yes. Can we learn from it? Yes. Is it the police fault? That I don't know. They're trained a certain way, and they're trained that when you shoot until the threat is over. So if they're feeling like they're being threatened, they are trained to shoot. They are not trained to shoot the weapon out of the person's hands. They're not trained to shoot a limb. They are trained to shoot the torso. The torso of the body is the largest area, and that's why we've had fatalities. Everything I've read, it's the police are doing their job. They're doing their job. And yes, there's a lot of controversy, and yes, there has been fatalities, and my heart goes out to those families, because that could have easily been my son in any of the situations that he was in. I have been fortunate that I've been there so that I've been able to talk him down so it doesn't escalate. Defunding the police. Defunding the police does not mean abolish the police. It means that we need to reallocate the funds. Everything that I've researched and read, and the calls to the police, at least in the Peel region, and I believe the Toronto area, most calls are mental health related. Police do have training, they do have mental health training, but what needs to be considered here is, should they be the frontline workers when there is a wellness check call? I believe that if they are to reallocate the funds, it should go towards extra resources. I know that in some jurisdictions they do have crisis workers, and they do call on the crisis workers, and I believe that a crisis worker was called in Ija's situation, but the person was not available. So we do need more crisis workers. I know that they do have databases of all the calls, and I know in Ben's case there was a few years ago where police was called numerous times. Ben was hospitalized numerous times, and they had it on their database who he is, and that there is a mental health issue there. They could take it a step further and put their support worker's name there, and maybe they could assist in there. So they need to reallocate the funds. We need the police. They are there to protect and serve. When it comes to mental health, there needs to be training on de-escalating the situation. And they also need to consider that just having their uniforms on as police officers are triggers with many people. And social workers and mental health counselors are trained with people that may be having an episode, that may be off their meds. And we also need to assess the frontline workers. If there is a social worker going in with a police officer, I'm sure there's a protocol who's in charge of what. So, in conclusion, we need the police. We need to understand what defunding means. It does not mean abolish the police. We need the police. We need change. We need more training and more mental health support workers. And there needs to be transparency and accountability. I'm not looking to blame anyone. I am looking for change. Any of these fatalities that I speak of, these victims that have passed, could have been my son. I have been in a number of situations where I thought, if I wasn't there, what might have happened? All I ask is that before you start saying, let's abolish the police, let's really look at what we need. And I pray that no one is in a situation where they have to call 911 for help, for a mental health check, or your loved one having an episode that you cannot control, I pray that there is a social worker or a mental health worker available to come to try to de-escalate it before the police officer has to de-escalate it. They are doing their job. Things change in a second. So that is my thoughts on police defunding and what I think needs to be done. And I think the big part of it is to educate ourselves and to have the knowledge to have this conversation. I will put the links below of some of the things that I mentioned today. And I wish you all lots of love. Remember, where there is breath, there is hope. Take care. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.